What do you think about this idea that we're giving false hope to people on the ground and therefore, and at the same time making their lives more difficult with the Chinese response?
When you look at any situation, when there's a freedom struggle, at the moment when it's being conducted, hope then does seem like false hope. And when George Washington was and his troops were freezing their ass off in Valley Forge, they were just a ragtag group of basically American peasants taking on the greatest superpower at the time, Great Britain. And the Americans were freezing. And at that time, there was even a environmental condition known as the small ice age. It was really cold. People were deserting. And the same, there are a lot of people, even Americans at that time, even the colonies were basically siding with the British. The majority were with the British, while the minority were with the freedom fighters. But they stuck it out. Did George Washington give false hope? Maybe, even he was in doubt about what he was doing. Right now, we don't know. But we don't fight, for freedom on the premise that we are bound to win. You know, we fight because there's an injustice. Winning and losing is secondary.
And so what about the idea that we're, just privileged foreigners on the outside, even Tendor Tibetan, I myself Tibetan, whatever. We're privileged to live on the outside and we don't suffer the consequences. We escape flying on our magic passports and people behind are left to suffer.
No, that's ridiculous because why do we fight for independence? Not only because we believe in it, not only because of let's say, our intellectual arguments, but primarily, I do it, and I'm sure you do it also, is because people inside Tibet are calling for independence. So far, the only expression, political expression that Tibetans have made in Tibet have all unanimously been for Tibetan independence. There has never been any public call for the middle way or for negotiation with China or for some kind of understanding with China. Invariably, any expression, political expression made by Tibetans in public and spontaneously by Tibetans, not ones that Chinese propaganda sort of department has sort of egged people on to do or say, but ones that are spontaneous and genuine have always been for independence, and by people who knew they were going to suffer and suffer terribly for what they had expressed, and that is why we support them. That is the only little thing we can do out West. Our lives are comfortable compared to theirs, but it would be more comfortable if we didn't do that. I would, it'd be far more comfortable for me because I know the Chinese would invite me, like at the drop of a hat. I have relatives in Tibet. I lose out a lot. I have very few, some of my closest relatives are Tibetan. I haven't spoken to them. I haven't contacted them for decades. And I want to. I want to go back to my country, even if only to visit, and I cannot do it. I suffer in many other ways. It's not huge like the suffering that other people have. But, I could easily ingratiate myself with the Chinese. I could do business also. And I'm not a fool. I could make a lot of money. But yeah, but it's not right. What we do by supporting these people, we take on extra work, extra burden, and we take on a whole lot of unwanted controversy, and we alienate ourselves even with our own, leaders who we love very much, like the Dalai Lama, who sometimes misunderstands what you're trying to do. But we are doing it for a right cause, and we are doing it for the people of Tibet, and they are calling on us to do it. Every Tibetan who gets arrested flying the national flag of Tibet in Papua is calling for Tibetan independence. He's not just flying the Tibetan flag because he likes the design.
What do you, I just want to, there's some topics that we've discussed on the blog here that I've written about or talked about. I would love to know some of your thoughts, and this is sort of, so taking it back, for one example, to the Olympics, talking about the issues of pollution and just the environmental crisis that it seems like China's in right now. I mean, of course, the world's in bad shape with global warming and whatnot, but, the scale of the Chinese environmental crisis is so overwhelming, and being there before the Olympics and seeing the 1 year before the Olympics and seeing the pollution, everybody's talking about it. What do you think about the impact that this will have on the Chinese leadership itself or China's own internal problems?
No, I think the whole environmental problem that you see now happening in China is not only tremendous, as you put it, but it's apocalyptic. People really don't realize all the statistics that we get right now, from the United Nations, from environmental groups, even from the Chinese government, and some of them are scary. But you have to multiply them by a factor of 10, maybe even more. We don't know. The experts don't know. The Chinese government, they really don't know what's going on. It's huge and it's scary and it's completely out of control. You get these editorials in the New York Times saying, "Oh, it's awful what's going on in China." But now the Chinese government reassures us that, that all these problems are because of local governments, who are not working on environmental laws that actually the center has already passed. Blaming the local government, but the center is enlightened and they're going to do something. It's impossible. Even if they wanted to do something, so it's gone to a point where, if they try to stop, if they try to really crack down on environmental, ecological, environmental violations by factories and things, it's going to hurt the economy. It's going to hurt the growth. And even a 0.5%, lessening of growth in China could cause social problems. So the problem is social problems that happen. Outbreaks of rioting will happen because of pollution and because of environmental degradation. But it's going to happen even more if they try to stop it. If you try to help the coal miners now in China, and try to stop Chinese using coal, it's going to hurt their industrial output. It's going to A lot of the miners are going to start rioting because they don't have wages. So it's a kind of no-win situation. It's really too awful to bear even sometimes thinking about it. And I think it's really important. That's why people who are going to even do anything on this should really research the whole situation carefully. One of the problems that we have is there's a Western kind of perspective and this is something that you must have faced many times. Like when you raise this issue, there's always one kind of wise guy, or there's some kind of professor who comes up and says, well, in the West, we've gone through our own industrial revolution and we've polluted tremendously. Now it's China's turn, and how can we, sort of knock China about this? And, I'm sure you must have faced this problem. But the fact is, these people don't realize is that China is a very old civilization. Even if it didn't have a industrial revolution in the contemporary sense, they had environmental degradation, ecological destruction in China going back nearly 600, 700, 800 years. The whole problem of the Yellow River is not a new one. The silting on the Yellow River is something that goes back over 1,000 years. Water pollution in China because of the density of population in these areas, the Yellow River, and the Wanghe Delta, all these areas goes back since time immemorial. In fact, in 1700, I think it was 85, when the Temple of Heaven in Beijing was struck by lightning and burned down. And that was under the Manchu emperors. They needed four trees basically for the four central pillars. It had to be of wood because there's a kind of sacred geomancy to this whole thing. They couldn't find one tree of that size left in China. They imported it from Oregon. The sailing ships from Oregon actually took these trees back to China. From those days, the problem is acute in China. So a lot of these people who talk about it are either being disingenuous or don't know the problem. China's problem is not a new one. And this is something, and the communists, it's not only this present day capitalist regime in Beijing that has caused this problem. The communists, China under communism, there was huge degradation of the environment. Thousands of lakes in China were basically covered over, with soil, basically so they could plant grain and wheat on it. Mao insisted on it. Thousands and thousands and thousands of acre, of nomadic pastoral land was destroyed because Mao wheat we planted on it. All that really later happened was just these lands became desert. The reason why you have Gobi Desert now next to Beijing is not only because of natural desertification. It's because of communist agricultural policies that were implemented, in the 60s, 70s. So all this has nothing just to do with present day, it doesn't have everything to do with present day China's industrial output. It has to do with a long running disregard for nature.